Oh, so let's get started. So again, thanks so much for joining this one. And this webinar is one that I've didn't think I'd be doing, but I've really been bombarded recently with just a lot of questions and a lot of people struggling with saying things, like, I just feel like I can't look away. I know that when I'm on social media, when I'm watching the news all the time, I notice that it takes such a toll on me. It feels horrible. But what am I supposed to do? I need to know what's happening in the world, right? Like that's just kind of the general sentiment from many, many people. And so, and me too. I've felt the same thing since March. It's my news consumption, my feeling level, all of that is very, very different than it was pre-March. And so I get it. And knowing a thing or two about habits and how they work and how we get sucked into them and all of that, it was really clear to me, that this kind of news checking, social media, all of that is a habit just like anything else that we talk about. And I'll talk about that in this webinar. It works in the same way. It works in our brain and our minds in the same way. It has that same kind of dopamine hit at times. It has that same appeal. There's a few things that are slightly different about it, which are really interesting to look at. But what this means is we can also be free of it by seeing how it works, just like we are with all kinds of other habits. So it's really hopeful. It's really good news. And I think it's super important to talk about. So I'm going to talk for a bit and I'm going to take some questions at the end. If you're watching this, if you're here on Zoom, go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat. I'm going to try to not look at that because it just distracts me. But put them in the Q&A, and they will be anonymous, and I'll be able to go through there and speak to some of the questions at the end. And if you're watching this on Facebook, post your questions on Facebook. And as soon as this is over, I'm going to hop over there, and I'm going to speak to a bunch of the questions that are posted there. Okay, great. Okay, so, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot that we need to know about, a lot that we want to know about, a lot of things to keep up on, a lot of things that are changing more quickly than we could ever keep up with, just constant change. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about what's happening now in the world that's maybe different from how there's a few things that are really different from how it's been at other times in the past. But one of the things that strikes me as I was thinking about this, yes, there's a lot going on. Yes, it's all changing. Yes, it's all important. But there's an aspect to what's happening now where it literally affects, I think, everyone on the planet. There are things happening that, no question, personally impact you and me. And the choices we make, really, literally, the choices we make this afternoon about where we're going and what we're doing, and way beyond this afternoon. And I think, I don't know, in my lifetime, there's been big news. There's obviously been things here or there that feel like they have more of a personal impact. But I don't know that most of us watching this have ever lived through a time when there is so much going on that is so huge and important and really life or death, like major stuff, and always changing, and impacts all of us. It hits home for everyone in some ways. And so I think what that's kind of done is it sort of created this perfect storm. So the perfect storm, and I'll flesh this out a little bit more, but the perfect storm is, again, we have a lot happening. It's personally relevant, at least a good portion of it is. It's emotional, it's divisive, it's full of drama, which minds love. And it's constantly, we're bombarded with it. We cannot avoid it if we wanted to. And please hear that I'm not advocating like avoiding being informed. I think it's important for most of us, for all of us, probably to varying degrees, to be informed about what's happening in the world. So this is not about like, shut it off, deactivate your Facebook, don't watch the news, it's bad for you. Absolutely not. It's about us looking and seeing how we can do that in a way that doesn't create such dissonance, and doesn't, like, we want to be informed and we want to know what's happening, but our mental health shouldn't have to suffer. Our feelings shouldn't have to plummet. And it shouldn't leave us with this lingering feeling of anxiety and like we're feeling horrible just because we've tuned in to see what's happening in the world. So this sort of perfect storm, in a sense, is it's big, it's everywhere, it's relevant, it's 24/7 coming at us again on social media. Many of us are working online. So even when you go online to do your work, you can't help but see headlines and ads and all kinds of things. Everyone's talking about it, and we're hearing everyone's opinions and how they're finding it. So you kind of can't hide. If you wanted to, you couldn't. And there's this aspect to this topic in particular, like what's happening in the world right now, that is, I think, kind of unique and maybe not there in all habits in the same way. And that is that we take all this in, we realize it doesn't always feel good, but we have our mind over here saying, but don't we need to know? We have our mind over here saying, and a lot of other minds in the world saying, yeah, but you're being a responsible citizen when you tune into what's happening in the world. You have to watch the news. You have to know what's happening. Or we're hearing or thinking in our own heads things like, doesn't all this information help me make good choices? Don't I need it to make a good choice? Don't I need it to be safe? Don't I need to know where the pandemic curves are going and where the death rates are and what the politicians are saying and where the fires are and, so many natural disasters, all of that. Don't I need to be watching it a lot in order to be safe and make good choices? And I want to look at that because I know that our mind will tell us that we do, and there's a good reason for that, but we don't to the extent that we're watching. And if you're in that camp where you're feeling like you can't look away, where you're refreshing the pages and hanging on every headline and feeling like, wow, I'm informed, but this does not feel good. This is too much. If you're in that camp, I'm going to make the argument and really put it to you to kind of just open your mind and open your heart and see what feels right to you around it, that much information is not really helpful in the way that our mind tells us it is. We don't necessarily need it to be safe or to make good decisions. And in fact, decisions and safety and being lived in the world and being good citizens, participating in elections and doing all of that stuff that we all want to do, that's coming from a place that's deeper than all of the headlines and chatter and he said this and she said that and all of that stuff. Okay. So let's look at this a little further. I'm going to break down what I just said and kind of walk us through it. And again, as I'm sharing, if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A and I'll get to them at the end, but just whatever's coming up for you, anything on your mind, feel free to just pop them in there and share anytime. So this thing about, and I know I don't need to describe this well because we're all living it, we're all in it, but this thing about how much is going on right now compared to pretty much any other time in our lives, I'm guessing, for the most part, none of us have lived through so much happening. And again, not only so much happening, but so much that's constantly changing and that affects each of us personally. It's pretty unprecedented. And the thing about how our mind works, so we as humans, our brain, our mind and our brain, its whole purpose is to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And the way it does that primarily is to think that it knows what's happening. So you may have noticed that little voice in your head. It wants to know everything. It wants certainty. It wants to know. It wants to make sense of what it's already seen. It wants to know what it's about to see and know what's coming. And it's just everything it does pretty much. And this is a bigger conversation, but we could really look at all the little things the mind does. It all comes down to just knowing. It just wants to know. It's this amazing, adorable little machine in our heads that loves us so much. And it just wants us to be alive and be healthy as long as we possibly can. So it's just gathering data and facts and feeding it back to us and trying to help us feel like we have some sense of what's here and what's what, and we can know what's coming so that we can relax. And again, kind of bigger conversation, but just to put it in a little bit of context, this is how our brain has evolved, and our brain evolution is a very slow process, but the world has changed very quickly. So back when there were so many threats to human beings, like, a couple 100,000 years ago, our brain had to be constantly vigilant to see what's coming, what's wrong, what might be wrong. That's how humans survived. So our brain got really, really good at that. What's wrong, what's coming, what might be coming. Think about that. Now, today, we are living in a world where our brain still is, we wouldn't be here if our brain didn't evolve to say what's wrong, what's coming, what might be coming. But think about how that impacts our moment to moment feeling. When our mind is constantly saying what's wrong and then wanting to answer its own questions with what's wrong, what's coming, what might be coming, it's this amazing kind of fertile ground for a mind to just run away with things and try to find certainty and make things up at times, which is totally what our mind does. Now, it's not making it up from out of nowhere. It's using all the data and all the information it's seeking. And that's part of this habit, is our mind is just saying, you need more. We don't know yet. We don't know how the holidays are going to be. We don't know who to vote for yet. We don't know if the natural disasters are coming our way. We need to go out and find more. And the more we're going out and finding more, we're getting kind of hooked into all of that. And our mind has this false sense of, okay, well, the more we see, the more information we gather, and the more we can tell you about what's likely to happen, the safer and happier everyone will be. Except it doesn't really work that way. It can't work that way because our mind is a machine. It's a computer that's really, really good. It's amazing. And it can predict and it can't predict, but it can figure and take in data and do all kinds of modeling, right? It's pretty amazing in that way. But it does get us hooked into this false sense of feeling like we know what's coming, and then we have this nagging sense that says, wait a minute, I don't really know if I know what's coming, because look at everything out here is changing so quickly. And then our mind, it becomes this loop, this hamster wheel, where our mind says, well, let's go find more, then you'll be okay. Well, let's go find more, then you'll be okay. And anyone who's ever been in any kind of habit, which is all of us, I'm sure, knows that feeling, right? It's the promise of just one last time, or just a little bit more, or you just need it today to get through this feeling, and then we'll stop. Then we'll find a healthier way to be. Well, that's happening so much right now with information, with this information habit, or this news or media habit, where it's this empty promise of a little bit more, then you'll be okay. Let's get through this bit. And it never really gets us, where we need to be. So think about the evolution piece a little bit, right? Our brain evolved 200,000 years ago to keep us safe from potential threats. And so it still constantly says, what's a potential threat? What might go wrong? It's the negativity bias that we all know about in neuroscience, right? The thing is, back in those days, there wasn't I shouldn't say there wasn't a whole lot going on. There was a whole lot going on, because there were true threats out there. People were dying from the elements and from hyenas eating them and all kinds of stuff. And we don't have that today. But the amount of information is a little different today in 2020 than it was 200,000 years ago. It's completely different today in 2020 than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So our world is changing so quickly, and there's so much more coming at us. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but meaning the media, technology, social media, all of it has gotten so much better at knowing how human psychology works and what gets us to keep reading and keep clicking, that we have this sort of perfect storm, where it's the media is getting better. It's always been this way. If it bleeds, it leads, right? So it's always been this way, except now it's everywhere. You can't pick up your phone or go to work on your computer or turn a TV on or talk to a friend without hearing something that someone else said about what's happening, So it really kind of has created this issue. There's this statistic that I heard on a podcast somewhere, and I listened to that. I swear I heard it. I know exactly I think I know exactly which podcast episode I heard it on. And in the last week, I've re-listened to that episode like 7 times to try to catch this stat. And maybe I heard it somewhere else. I don't know. Needless to say, it's been a big time suck for me in the last week trying to find this stat. And I never did find it, but I want to say kind of the gist of it. It was something along the lines of, comparing how much information we take in now versus how much our earlier ancestors did. And I even mean just like 50 years ago, 100 years ago. I want to say it was like there's more information in one issue of the Wall Street Journal than people took in like in an entire lifetime at one point in history, and if that's exaggerated, just get the gist of it. We are bombarded with so much stuff, so much more than in any other time in history. And our brain, it hasn't changed that much to kind of figure out how to deal with it. So it just does the best it can. And it absolutely responds to the emotion and the drama, kind of the soap opera nature of a lot of our news these days. He said, she said, all of this divisiveness. That's something, unfortunately, even though we don't like it, we know it feels icky to take all that in. It doesn't feel good. It's kind of like candy for a mind because it has all that emotion and drama in it. Okay, so that's a little bit about kind of, again, how this gets so sticky. And I don't want to like bash news media or anything. Everyone's just doing the best they can, doing the job that they think is the best. But, many people have been talking about this documentary, Social Dilemma, that's on Netflix. And it's becoming more and more clear and widely known, I think, that there's all kinds of tactics out there happening that are just designed to get our attention, to get our eyeballs and our brains on certain information. And we don't want to, I think it's really helpful to just know that, not in a blaming way, not in a fearful way, like, oh no, they're brainwashing me, but just in a way where we can be really wise about things and know, yeah, I'm not really hearing the unbiased facts here. Like, we rarely nowadays hear or read unbiased facts. We hear editorialized versions of everything that's out there, and that it's just the way it is at this point in time. And it's okay. It's just good to know. See, if we don't know that, we're going to get even more sucked into everything we're hearing. But if we know that and we remember it at times, it helps. It helps us naturally have this sort of filter where we can know, okay, this is someone's opinion. It may be based on a true story or based in fact, but there's a lot of editorial in here, and I don't need to take all that on and believe it and feel it. Okay, so the second part of this, which is the really interesting part to me, is we know how the media works. We know we're getting all this information. But I think there is also what I would call a misunderstanding about our role in this and what we should do or what we need to do even in order to make good decisions and be safe and be good citizens. And again, I'm all for being informed. And that's what this was called, right? How to be informed without losing your mind. All for being informed. But I really want to pose the question for all of you to just sit with and see how it feels to you. Like, do we make better decisions when we have more information? Does all of this information, all of this stuff we're taking in, keep us safer? Is it good for us, basically? Because I think that's the idea. And I think that's for sure the idea that our mind is telling us. Our mind, again, which is just this computer saying, you need more, we need more certainty. It makes perfect sense that a mind is going to say, well, yeah, here are all the reasons why you need it. You're going to know, which candidate to pick. And then that's important for this reason and that. And a mind will do that because that's what a mind does. Again, I've been really steeped in the research because I'm writing a new book, and I don't want to go into all of that here, but so much research that shows that our minds, need to justify choices that are made and decisions and things we do. And in a lot of ways, they kind of make up stuff. So people will make a choice or make a decision, even for something like a political candidate. And a mind will come in after the fact, and I mean milliseconds after, but after the fact, and say, yep, here's why you chose that person, because of all these reasons. Let's go down the pro and con list, all these reasons why they're the best one. And those aren't really the reasons. And again, they can study this in a lab where they can see some people didn't even have access to those reasons, to those facts. And their mind is still saying, here's why. So our mind doesn't want to feel like it's not doing its homework. Our brain is all about doing its homework and giving us a real sense of security and certainty that we can relax into. But it connects dots that aren't there. It fills in blanks that it shouldn't be filling in, that it's not filling in with real data or real information. There's so much research on whether more information really helps people make solid decisions, and overwhelmingly it points to no. In fact, there's a balance, like no information, not so great, right? We need to know some stuff. But then we hit that point where there's kind of a sweet spot, and then we fall off the other end where too much information leads us to making horrible decisions. We're overwhelmed. We are full of anxiety. We procrastinate on things because we don't know what to do with all of this stuff that we have floating around in our heads. So just that alone, I mean, if we just kind of look at that and sit with that, why am I continuing to go back? And if your mind's saying, well, you need to, do you really? Do you really? It leads into a bigger question that this is the stuff I love talking about. Like, where do decisions come from? Where does safety come from? Because your mind will tell you, explicitly or not, it will say, you need to know what's happening so you can be safe. And especially now, right? But where do our choices and our actions, our decisions, like ways that we live that lead to our ultimate safety, where do those really come from? Do they come from the computer? Do they come from the computer crunching data and information and then spitting out an answer or a next step or a decision? If they do, then that's another conversation, right? But they don't. They don't. They come from the quiet beyond our mind. They come from another place. So I love, for years, I've always shared this Einstein quote that intuition is a sacred gift. Our gift of, and intuition is just the word he happened to use. If this is a real quote of his, I think it's pretty accurate. Intuition is another word for us just sort of, from this formless place, like we just see things. It's in our design. We have a mind that is computer-like and can go out and find all the information and crunch the numbers. But ultimately, there's something bigger that lives us. It is who we are. It is our formless essence. It is how we can think and think and think, and then take a break, go for a walk, and then the answer appears. We didn't think it there. Our brain didn't bring it up. Our brain did some helpful work, maybe getting us there, like priming the pump for it, but the answers don't come from the brain. And, I deeply know this to be true, but I want you to just kind of sit with it. Like, what if this is true? So don't take my word for it, but just something to be curious about and ponder for yourselves. Can you see how clarity and decisions and things that have us pay attention and then get out of the line of the hurricane or the fire or the earthquake, or a feeling about a candidate, or a feeling about sending our kids back to school or not, coupled with some data. But the feeling is what does it. So the Einstein quote is something like, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind, our little brain computer, is its faithful servant. And we've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And I just think I've overused that quote. I should know it pretty accurately by heart by now, but I don't. But I've overused it to death in the past 10 years, because it truly captures it. Like, it underlies so much of everything I ever share and try to do. And I think just so much of what helps us in life is to see that it is not up to us and our brains alone and information and data and facts and all of that, that we are tapped into something so much bigger and wiser that is always living us, always. It's what brings all of that up. Even when we know a bunch of facts and have data, which is wonderful, something bigger is what has us remember it, is what has it come to mind when we need it. Like, our brain isn't managing all of that. We aren't managing all of that. It's coming from a much deeper, wiser place. And in all of this information overload, which we get so easily sucked into when a lot is happening in the world, we're really in a society, as Einstein said, that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift, has kind of thrown the intuition piece out the window. And for each of us on an individual, personal level, that is especially happening when we're anxious, when we're worried, because this is what we know about human beings, is that when we're relaxed, we're already just letting life live us, right? When we're feeling secure and comfortable, and we're just in life, in the moment, just navigating our way through, life is just living us, and we know it. That's where we have that natural, perfect balance, where we can go to our intellect for a math equation or a fact, or to say, hey, I think I should turn the news on and see what's happening in this area, or to ask a friend a question, or to open Google or open a book. That naturally occurs to us as a thing to do when we're just in life, when we aren't so in our heads. That balance is perfect. That's when intuition is the gift, and the intellect, or the rational mind, is the servant. But as soon as we get caught up in our heads, as soon as we get afraid, as soon as that brain that loves you so much, that is only trying to protect you, jumps in and speeds up and starts saying, oh no, you don't know, you need to know, we need to know more stuff, like what's going to happen, that's when we get it flipped. And that's when we kind of get in trouble. And that's when we start to look outward, so much outward rather than inward. We're looking out and we're trying to add and get more. And again, I'm used to talking about this in terms of habits. It's when we feel discomfort, we feel uneasy, and we add alcohol or food or stuff or working or whatever it is we add to try to calm that busy mind down. And sometimes it's information. A lot of times it's information that we're adding. But like, we can see that. We can see how that's working. We can be compassionate with ourselves and beyond how that's going. But we don't want to think that, especially in the information case, oh, well, this is different. Oh, well, I need all that information. You don't need tons of information that feels heavy and bad and overwhelming any more than I needed to eat 2 cakes when I was caught up in binge eating, or any more than a hoarder needs to buy more stuff, or a person with any habit needs more of their thing. No, that's just what a busy, scared mind will tell us in the moment. So when we really look, if we, and again, my words are nothing. So please kind of just see what resonates with you in that. But think about the decisions you've made in life, if we want to say it that way, the decisions you've made, or think about the big things that have happened in your life. Things like choosing your partner, ending up with your partner, or buying a house, or choosing a job, or any of those sorts of things. We've all had that experience of making the checklists, making the pro and con lists. I mean, the partner one cracks me up every time, right? Like, here are the things I want. Come on, we all know that that's not really where it's at. And that doesn't mean that's a bad thing to do. I think it's a fun thing to do, a great thing to do, and really helpful. So if you're looking at 2 houses or 2 jobs or even 2 partners, or you're imagining your future partner, hey, if it helps you to get a little clarity on what you'd love to see, go for it. But don't we all know that that's going to get thrown out the window as soon as we step into the office that feels right, or step into the house, or see the partner that just feels right? You know, we tend to just throw out the intuition and cling to all of these facts and information. And in truth, we all know, I know we all know that that's really not where wise decisions or anything comes from. It's certainly not where safety comes from. So even in today's world, you know, even when they are questions like, do I go on that trip I was planning on going on? You know, do I send my kids to school, or do I have them do this virtually? Who do I vote for? When do we evacuate? These are super real issues. What do we do about injustice in the world? How do we change things? How do we change things for our planet and for the people on our planet to make this the kind of world we all want to live in? Those are especially huge questions. And so what will happen is a mind will get especially active, saying, I got this. Don't worry. We're gonna make sure everyone knows they're equal and that they're treated equally. Okay, I got this. But your mind doesn't got this. Nobody's mind has this, right? That's not where it's coming from. And anger and gathering more stuff and acting from that place is, I don't see, and I'm not a historian, but I don't see any major change in history, anything that's been deeply good for our planet coming from anger. Now, that doesn't mean there's not anger around it, but I don't see it coming from gathering information and watching all of this and getting mad. I mean, yes, a certain level of anger wakes us up for sure. But at some point we have to dip down into that well, in that formless space that is who we really are, which is the source of everything new and good. So another thing I've been, kind of a metaphor I've been loving lately, because I'm writing about it, is where new thought comes from, new ideas. And I mean that again in terms of big ideas that are going to change things for our planet in ways that are very much needed. And I also mean that in terms of like, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Because I have no clue. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the way it works, big or little, it works the same way. And when we're in our computer, in our brain, right, and we're gathering information and sorting it and evaluating it and making our pro and con lists, it's a little bit like if you had to write a book, let's say, based on all of the files that are stored on your personal computer right now. All of the files there, everything there, there's probably some brilliant stuff, I'm sure. Great stuff, right? If you've been online for as long as I have, I mean, there's just hard drives after hard drives of it, tons of content. But in a sense, I mean, it's recycled. It's not fresh and new. It's stuff you've thought before. You might see it and it might bring up a new thought. But again, that new thought isn't coming from the hard drive. What's on your hard drive is kind of done. It might still be helpful and useful. Not saying that, but it's not fresh and new. It's recycled. And I always think of that when we're out watching the news and taking in stuff. I mean, yes, we're learning new facts and seeing new things that are happening in the world right now. But in a way, when we hear it, and especially when we hear it with someone's spin on it, with someone's editorial kind of tucked in for us to not notice, but we notice when you look for it, with this slant, with that slant, with this flashing clickbait behind it. It's so much recycled stuff. It's somebody else's thoughts filtered through billions of people and billions of channels, making its way to you. Now, you could write a book with just the information that's stored on your hard drive, and it would maybe even be a really good book, but it's not at all going to be the same as starting fresh. As it's like, I imagine we have this well within us. It really is who we are. But when we fall out of our thinking, fall out of all the recycled facts and figures, and we just feel into what wants to come through now, that is new and fresh and unique, and not recycled. It's just, it's relevant. It's in real time. This kind of wisdom, this kind of common sense, this kind of information is constantly pouring through us. This is what Einstein talked about as intuition. It is fresh and in real time. It's constantly pouring through us. I mean, I'd throw away all the files and sit and let something brand new come through me in a heartbeat. I'm sure you all would too, if you want something that's brand new and relevant and good and, unique and new in the world. And this isn't just about writing books. I mean, that's how we can do everything. We can gather what our brain can gather. That's helpful. It's helpful. We need that information and that knowledge. But then we kind of set it aside and we trust that something bigger, and I shouldn't say trust because you don't even have to trust it. You just be curious about it and see what you see what your experience of it is. Something bigger will have that stuff show up when and if we need it. And that is true, again, whether we're making decisions about, do I evacuate now or later? Do I send the kids to school en masse or do I keep them home? And anything in between. We all are really, really smart, sometimes too smart. And we tend to look there and hang out there so much more. And I think, I remember a Sydney Banks tape recording I listened to, where he talks about how a 1% shift in consciousness would change everything. And I feel like that's what's on offer for us. I mean, everything has changed in the world and we need a shift in consciousness, but it isn't going to happen by going out, constantly looking outward. The shift in consciousness comes when we look within to what hasn't happened yet, what hasn't occurred yet, the formless within us. And from there, we see possibility, we see new things, and then we can take them out into the world. Does that make sense? Like, don't think about it too hard, but think about it this way. It's like, if we're just looking out at the world, at the macro of things, oh my gosh, like it's overwhelming. There's so much. And of course, our mind instantly says, this is a problem and that needs to change. And I don't know how to change these things. So that's where we just get overwhelmed, because our mind tries to convince us that I can handle it all, but it can't. And it knows it can't. Like, we don't see the answers when we're out in the macro looking out. We don't see a lot of answers for macro. We get information and then we have to go in. Then we have to go in within. And from within, we see things for the world, for ourselves, for what's for dinner, for anything we need in life. So I hope that this feels so tangible and practical to me. And I always worry that I know that at times it feels very vague, but I also know that at times as we listen, it becomes less vague and it feels like something we really can sort of get a feel for. So in terms of what we're here talking about, media and news, and we're just bombarded with it. We can't look away at times. See if you can find a balance for yourself that feels right to you and makes sense for you, knowing that the rational mind is the faithful servant. It will let you know. It will go out and gather information. And then then we don't need to rehearse and beat that to death. Like, we don't even have to do a whole lot with it. It's there. And then that bigger intuitive mind is the real gift. And that's what's going to bring up what we've seen and do something fresh and new with it that's helpful and relevant in a moment. So how that looks in a super practical way for me, I'll just say, is following my feelings when I'm being informed by what's happening out in the world. Meaning, checking in on things. And since March, I've gone through lots of ups and downs of a lot of checking in on things and very, very little checking in on things and back and forth. But it feels like I always think of this well, this bigger well where all the good stuff comes from. Everything I really need in life is in that well. And out here in the macro, in the noisy world, there's information out there too, but it's like, that's like the salt. You just need a little bit. And again, you feel where that is for you, because I couldn't possibly know. It's different for everyone, but it feels to me like checking in, seeing what's there. And as soon as I start to get overwhelmed, or if I do, or as soon as I start to feel anxious, if that's what's happening, or worried or any of that, I know, okay, now my mind is just spinning with, it's too much salt. Now my mind is spinning with the information, thinking it needs to do something with it. That's time to back off. I've seen what I need to see. Now I'm just going to get quiet and know that our wisdom, our true essence, who we really are beyond our mind, knows what to do with what we've seen. And it's this out a little bit, go back within, see what comes up from there. Your mind might not like this. Your mind likes, again, to gather information and be really fast about it all and spit out answers and tell you what's coming and all of that. So, for example, when everything was happening with the George Floyd situation, I found for myself, it was so overwhelming, emotionally overwhelming and mentally overwhelming to be very informed on all the ins and outs at that time. I could dip in a little. I knew in a global sense what was happening in the world, but I just knew I had to listen to my feelings around that. And that was not always easy, because even in some of our communities and stuff, there were people saying, hey, where's the statement about this? Where's the podcast about this? What do I do? And, for me as a helper too, feeling like my mind saying, yeah, you owe it. Like you better say something about this that can help people. In the bigger sense, I couldn't. I wasn't ready until I was ready. And even when I was ready, I'm not sure how helpful it was, but I could not keep looking out. I couldn't force anything from the well. I had to take little bits and then just get quiet. And the rope that brings the bucket up from the well, it's going at its own pace. I could not rush it. But there was a time, and there is always a time, I think, for all of us when we're like, okay, and we get to go vote and we do the best we can with what we've seen, or we get to make the decision when the time is there to make the decision, and we do the best with what we've seen. So just see if you can feel that for yourself. Let your feelings show you. Your feelings aren't showing you, oh my gosh, the world's a mess. Your feelings are showing you where your mind is going with everything. And that's beautiful. That means our feelings are a perfect personal feedback system, personal guidance system. They're showing you when your mind is going nuts with this, and maybe it's time to back off a little bit. Your feelings are showing you that. Other times, the world hasn't changed, but your feelings are different. So in those cases, your feelings are showing you, okay, go ahead and, do whatever makes sense to do. But we get to use that as kind of our own guidance. So let me go to some questions. And please, if you have any comments, any questions about anything I've shared, or even kind of broader, anything around media and news being a habit, how to navigate it all, anything I've shared, go ahead and ask them. And again, those of you on Facebook, feel free to put your questions there as well. Okay, so there's a question, excellent question. What would be the process for getting out of our rational mind and into our sacred mind, or the gift? I love this question. So there's not so much of a process, but again, it's a knowing how to sort of read the feedback. I think so much of that, So much of how we live more in the intuition and let the rational come up to be the servant when needed is just simply understanding that it works that way. And that doesn't always sound like a satisfying answer, but honestly, think about it. For most of my life, and I'm guessing most of your lives, I thought my brains were what I had. I mean, my brains and my muscles, like that was going to get me through life. So I better be smart, and I better be strong, and I better think a lot, and I better figure things out because no one else is coming to the rescue. And what else do I have? Maybe luck, right? Maybe a little bit of luck, or, that was like as good as it got. To start to flip that around and really deeply come to see and have a deeper understanding of who we are as humans and how our experience works, and to see that a mind just runs in circles trying its best, but it's just a tool, and it's not always a great tool. But that we have this bigger source of intuition. That understanding has been all of it. That's the process, is a deeper understanding of who we are and how our mind works, because we just don't have that awareness. No one teaches us this stuff. But when we start to see how it works, and that it works in that way, we get it, and we do see it. And naturally, you will be in the intuition, and you'll honor it. You'll feel it as a gift. You'll come to trust it and respect it more. And naturally, you'll hear your mind spinning in circles and saying, no, we need more content. We need more information. What does he say? What does she think? And you'll feel the tightness of that. And you'll know in the tightness of that, okay, servant, you've done your job. Okay, servant, go take the rest of the day off, or go take the rest of the hour off. You come to trust a peaceful feeling way more than you come to trust a busy mind searching for urgent answers. And I think that's so much of it. So just know that it is our design. We don't have to do anything to be hooked into this intuition, this bigger guidance. It is who we are. It is our design. It's also our design that our mind talks a lot, but when we see it all, how it works for what it is, that it all balances out. You naturally start to navigate it more and more easily. It's a great question. Okay, so a question, how about just switching to a low information diet? Isn't it possible to get all important news within 15 minutes of scanning a national and local paper? I think that's a great idea if that works for you, if that feels good to you. So, I mean, this is just my opinion. Yeah, I'm pretty sure 15 minutes of scanning for headlines in most cases, more than what the average human being needs. That's my gut as well. So if that kind of arrangement works for you, you just kind of look, and that's in a sense what I do, especially now. I mean, before, I didn't check headlines a whole lot, or big news outlets much at all. Since the pandemic, I have. But again, it's kind of what you're mentioning. It's like, let's dip in, see what's going on. But I don't want to make it a formula either. Everyone's going to know for themselves what feels right. So if something like that works for you, great. But kind of just notice where your feeling level is, and you'll know. Maybe 15 minutes is way too much. Maybe it's not. Maybe you feel good reading it. So again, just to stress, like, it's not about the media being an enemy or anything like that, or being bad at all. Obviously, it has a lot of good, and we need the information. So sometimes it feels good. If it feels good to us, wonderful. If it doesn't, now the servant is trying to take in too much. But it's a good suggestion. Someone says, can you talk about the resistance one feels to trusting intuition? I don't know. I think we don't necessarily even have, like, trust is a big word that's loaded for a lot of people. We don't even necessarily have to trust our intuition, because in a way, if we think, oh, you have to trust it, what does that do? It puts you straight in your head, puts me straight in my head. Like, can I trust it? Do I trust it? I don't think it's even about trust. I think it's about openness and just curiosity and looking for ourselves. How have you, asking the question, or anyone that feels this resistance, how'd you decide who to be with as a life partner? How'd you decide which house to buy? It wasn't your checklist. Your mind might be telling you it was your checklist, 100% guarantee it wasn't. So in things like that, like, how did you know when there was a real threat? Okay, now it's time to act. Like, I think when we look with an open mind and we're curious, we tend to see, okay, that's not coming from more information. It's coming from somewhere else. So that's where the trust comes from, is you just see it with your own eyes that, hey, this is what I see in my life. So again, that's why I say, don't take my word for it, but explore it, each of us, for ourselves. Okay, I'm wanting to be charitable to people who are caught up in conspiracies and other odd ways of making sense of reality. Instead, I feel angry at them and full of judgment, like they're stupid or ignorant or gullible or greedy. I'm already estranged from my father, who's deep into conspiracy theories. I so feel this question. I think this is happening for so many people right now. He's so angry. He calls me names and won't speak to me because he thinks I'm the enemy. He's 83, and I'm really upset about this. I feel for you, um, and I hear a lot of these kinds of stories right now. And I think it's just, it is where we are with things. There is so much divisiveness and so many lies that people are able to say because they have a platform to say them, that people believe. And, you know, it's easy probably to be in judgment of that. I think we all have, we can call that gullible and ignorant and all of that. Um, and I'll just be really like personal about it. What helps me personally is to just be really grateful that I've had this opportunity to kind of see in a bigger picture way that I think a lot of people, especially your father's generation at 83, hasn't had the opportunity to see. I mean, I don't, again, I'm no historian, uh, but there's a whole generational thing there where you trust authority. You blindly do what people tell you to do, especially if they're, big leaders in life, especially if they're on TV. You just do what they say. And people like your father, I think, are the victim here, because there is a lot. And again, I don't want to paint this picture of like there's a victim and a perpetrator and all of that. But there is this perfect storm of people knowing how to get our attention, knowing how to get us to believe things that aren't necessarily true. And I don't know if it's so much ignorance or gullibility, we could call it that, but it's kind of like, wow, it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad in a way. And so maybe being able to see it in that way with him, where there's a little less judgment and a little more, and I'm not suggesting you call him and say, I feel sorry for you, but you know it, you can have the compassion maybe for what he's caught up in. And hopefully we can relate to people, especially people we love the most in the world and our own families. I have this too. We just relate at a level that has nothing to do with current events, nothing to do with what you believe, because that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we think or believe, or who we're voting for, or how we feel about certain issues, it's where we're so focused, but man, it's not important in the big picture of life, especially when it comes to relationships and human connection. We all are 99.99999% the exact same. And we have this tiny fraction that's different. And that those differences are at the level of our thinking, our beliefs, and what we see and how we take in the world. But again, I think we have that flipped a lot. We see what someone believes and we think, I could never, or like, I don't understand you. And I'm guilty of it too. But let's flip that and just see, wow, we're all human beings doing the best we can with the information we're given, with how our mind makes sense of what we know. And, we're all kind of doing our best in that sense. Yeah. I keep wanting to divide things into good and evil, it says, and I really want to become, yes, I'm hoping I can find a place of rest or peace that helps me find home. Absolutely. And I think, again, that's another thing, this good and evil, them and us. To our brain, there's a certain level of protection, perceived protection in that, because think about 200,000 years ago, you needed to know who was on your side and who was going to kill you. So our brain is very much an us or them, black or white, good or evil machine. So when you're in that place, when any of us are in that place, and again, it's easy to be because there's a lot, all the information coming at us is about us and them, good and evil, mask wearers and not mask wearers. And everywhere. But when we're in that, we're in our thinking. We're just in that rational servant mode 100%. We're never 100%, but we're focused there, and everything looks divisive. And that's just feedback for us. That's just our alarm, a sign for us saying, hey, I'm not seeing the bigger picture. My brain machine that sees things in black and white is leading the charge right now. Let me see if I can just step back from that. Let me just unhook from that a little bit. And what you will find is that as that intuitive gift comes to the forefront more and more, as you go into your well, the well within you, people look a lot more similar. All those divisions and lines tend to disappear, or at least fade a lot. A question, I'm confused when to wear a mask and when not to. My aunt who has cancer is facing her 8th surgery next month. They stopped by to visit us. She wanted to see me before her surgery. We sat outside at first wearing masks, then we came inside. Some wore masks and some didn't. There were only 5 of us, and I wanted to hug her so bad that I couldn't. I mean, man, if that isn't just a question that would have made no sense to any of us a year ago, yet it is the question that unfortunately hits us all in the heart right now, because it's what we're all dealing with. And, you know, when you say I'm confused about when to wear a mask and when not to, go to your well. Confusion, go to that well, that well within you, and know that there is no objective right answer. There is you seeing from a fresh place in the moment what feels right to you in real time right now, and just letting that live you. Now, a brain will say there's a right and wrong. Do I do it now? And a brain will point out inconsistencies, right? Well, you wore it here, but you didn't wear it there. And what are you doing? And all of that. But we just have to, that's where the confusion comes from, is when we're saying, well, wait a minute, this or that. And we're trying to weigh it all with our minds. Beyond all this mental stuff, there's not a lot of confusion. And when we can sit with the fact that there is no universal, objective, right or wrong answer to anything in life, there's us moment to moment to moment, going to our well, letting that intuition live us. And all that looks like is we just do what most occurs to us. You're coming from a good place. Like, that does a lot of it for you. You have the relevant information. So you just let life live you, knowing that you can't really, there's no black and white, right or wrong. Okay, this is the last question I'll take. What about when uncomfortable feelings come from information about a sad or upsetting situation? Aren't those feelings just reflecting the situation rather than an overbusy mind, and not necessarily a cue to stop reading? I think it can feel very formulaic in a sense. Like, well, is this feeling showing me to stop reading? Is it showing me to keep reading? And I think we kind of just want to back off from it at that level, and just know that even reading our feedback is being done for us. So yes, we hang out in stuff that doesn't feel good, sometimes maybe longer than we need to, or longer than we see we should, because our mind is saying you need this information. But we know when you have your hand on a hot stove, to back off. Like, we just get this bigger gut feeling about how much to go in, or how much to go out, I should say, and how much to go in to the well. That whole balance is going to live us, especially when we have a sense that that's going on, that that's a real mechanism that's happening, that's helping us through life all the time. So the uncomfortable feelings coming from the situation, I mean, I think we're all seeing things in the world that we're sad about, that we're grieving, or that we're afraid of. And that's human. That's human. But they're not really coming from the situation. We're going to feel all that stuff. And just because you feel sad, I mean, none of us have watched the news, I'm guessing, in the past 6 months and not felt sad. So we feel sad. We feel the fear. We see what's happening. And if it was just like, oh, I feel sad, turn it off, that's not what we're talking about. And that's not helpful. But to know that, yes, to a point where it's overwhelming, our mind is taking these images and these facts and this information and adding a lot to it. Our mind doesn't just take in facts as neutral facts. It adds a ton of meaning and therefore and what if. Again, this is just what a brain does. So that's why I just think it's so important to kind of see, whoa, when we're feeling super emotional at this stuff, it's no longer about being informed. It's not. That's what you can ask yourself. Is this about being informed? Or is this feeling like I'm sucked into the story and my mind saying, what if, and oh no, and you have to do something? Because that's a dramatic mind. And I am not saying we don't have to do things about things in the world. But again, from what I can see, fresh idea that's actually going to help us, that's not just recycled old fear, that's actually going to make a difference in the world, is going to come from that well. It's going to come from when we get quiet and look within and have a new thought. It's going to come from that 1% rise in consciousness that we can all have, that will never come by looking out there. When we get quiet and peaceful and see all the good that's running through all of us, and see the design of human beings, and see just everything that's working on our behalf, that's when we have that rise of consciousness. And that's where we say, oh, I can talk to this person, or do this thing, or even watch that news report, or whatever it might be. But we're going to see it when we're in that space. And when we're spinning in fear and discomfort, long term, we're just not as likely to tap into it. So I hope that's helpful. Again, please don't hear anything I'm saying as any sort of formula, anything I'm telling you should do. You all know, we all are so well equipped with everything we need to navigate life. We are so designed and well equipped with everything we need to make sure our planet survives, and to change things in the world. Like we got it. We are good. We just need to know that. And I think this helping to know where to look and when to kind of stop all the clutter, especially in the name of I need more. No, I think just this balance, we're all going to feel it out for ourselves. So I really hope this has been helpful. Please let me know. You can post comments on the Facebook page, the event, or the live stream. You can email me. You can reach out in any way. I really hope it's helpful. And I wanted to mention that if you want to see more about this intuition versus rational mind, and just how this balance helps us navigate everything in life, habits, depression, anxiety, anything we're up against, the Little School of Big Change is starting next Monday, this coming Monday. So it's starting on September 28th. And it's an amazing, amazing chance to immerse in this and really see who we are and how it works, and have that rise in consciousness for yourself, because it's the only thing that does it. It's the only thing that leads to change. It's the only thing I've ever seen lead anyone out of a habit or long-term anxiety, or to make a positive change in the world, or create something that helps people, is to go within and have our own new, fresh thought that's relevant and designed for us in that moment, in real time. And it's just a really amazing 6-week program, community opportunity to get to explore this in a big way. So you can see more about that at thelittleschoolofbigchange.com. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope this has been helpful, and I hope to see you again really soon. Bye, everyone.